So Star Wars The Force Awakens was a pretty good movie. How good is the movie? Well, it's the 8th best Star Wars movie we have. No, that wasn't a joke. Now before I spend the next 40 minutes justifying that point, we might as well get the content ID deadlock out of the way. Yes, Disney and all the other criminals filing these illegal DMCA claims are a bunch of dicks. So before we get into this proper, I might as well give you guys some context. So I didn't watch the movie when it came out in theaters, and that was mostly due to the extreme overhype. Now that didn't reflect poorly on the movie, but it did make me hate the fanbase that wouldn't shut up about it, and made me roll my eyes every time an ad popped up for it. Then the reviews came out, and I said, at least everyone is saying it's an above average movie, which that's all it really needed to be. Then it came out on DVD, and my friend wanted to watch it, so we watched it, and then I hated it. With literally no expectations to meet from me, and somehow not even meeting that, it's almost profound how bad this turned out. Nearly everything about this movie is bad, and a lot of it objectively so. What isn't blatant pandering and nostalgia bait is just inept filmmaking, and it makes The Phantom Menace look amazing. This basically boils down to not a whole lot being established, characters being unrealistic and confusing, and the Disney formula with a bit of J.J. Abrams flavor being forced into a story that was already pretty simplistic, completely breaking what made Star Wars work. A lot of this is due to Rey not working because she has two characters forced together with all but the worst flaw removed. Now, I was going to discuss that idea first, but then I realized it would force me to go on tangents to convey my points, and that would force me to change up my format, and I'm already unoriginal enough, so here we go, second verse, same as the first. So this movie starts out harping on New Hope immediately, with not only the opening shot being a callback, but the entire opening sequence seems to be directly lifted from the movie. From the Empire attempting to capture an under-equipped group of rebels in order to prevent information getting to the rebel headquarters, the capture of an important figure that should have this information, and the droids getting away and that directly linking to the protagonist.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme, every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one.
Now, I'm not going to talk about this again, as the movie being nostalgia bait doesn't even factor in it being terrible, but I just wanted to illustrate that this is extremely frequent in this movie, and whether or not it bothers you isn't a factor in it being an objective flaw. What's sad is these elements are significantly worse than their New Hope counterparts. I think it's safe to say that the beginning of A New Hope implies that the rebels got caught stealing the information, and thus the chase and capture of Princess Leia happened. How did this old man get the rest of that map? Generic statements about the balance of the Force, and platitudes so meaningless you'll have to roll your eyes. I'm sure there's a book somewhere telling us how he got his hands on this, but we have no in-continuity reason as to why. And it's the opener of the movie. And then this line happens, which makes sense if you're alluding to Leia being the general.
The general? To me, she's royalty.
So to an audience that doesn't know Leia is the general, it doesn't seem so bad, but once you've already know this fact, this conversation comes off weird. Poe is a high-ranking something in the Resistance. He knows who Princess Leia is and that she is a princess. And he smiles at that line as if it was charming when it was painfully obnoxious. And then it's made even worse because Leia being the general was revealed in the title crawl, meaning this awkward line of dialogue has no reason to be in the script. And this is when I knew the movie was going to be bad. Oh, JJ, you're a great director. Oh, is the death of a fascist that helped in the liquidation of 50 billion people really all that sad? No, it's not. But what's worse is that this is meant to distinguish between Finn and all the other stormtroopers, and they think that we're so stupid that we have to label the good guy in order to know that the guy not murdering unarmed civilians is not a bad guy. The sad thing is, if they left the blood off, nothing different would be shown on screen other than calling the audience stupid. His on-camera performance is more than enough to convey that this stormtrooper is not okay with the situation and is unwilling to outright murder people. But no, I love being called stupid. And then Kylo Ren just kills the old man. You know, the guy the First Order somehow knew he had part of the map? It's awfully convenient he gave that map away and then the guy just didn't leave, as the lives of a few villagers are not worth allowing the entire Empire to take control of the galaxy again. It would have been extremely funny if he had just dug a small hole out somewhere in the desert, and now that he's dead, it would take the First Order 400,000 man-hours to find it. Go explain that to Snooki. And then we have this beautiful scene in which JJ is one hell of a director. So Rey looks over at an older woman cleaning, and she contemplates how sad her inevitable future is, which seems okay outside of it going against established continuity. But really this comes off far worse than an exposition dump because it's superficial depth. This is exactly the same scene in Titanic where she sees a little girl folding a napkin in her lap, and it just makes you roll your eyes. At least in Titanic it fit more, as rich white people are self-absorbed enough to think like that. With Rey having extreme abandonment issues, why would she reflect on the fact that she's stuck on Tatooine? She wants to be there. And if we're talking about the badass aspect of her character, she wouldn't even notice it at all. And then two guys get upset at her for taking too long, which boggles the mind. How do you have a line at a small bucket filled with dirty water and a brush? And then we get into the portion BS. Now this is going to sound pedantic as all get out, but everything I'm going to say over the next few minutes is conveying a single point. Nothing is established, and that's a problem. Supposedly, this town's entire economy is completely based around this dehydrated food. Now, whether that's because people just chose that, or because it's under the dictator control of Jabba the Wannabe, and he's a petty sadistic dick, is up to you. But since it isn't established, we have to simply say their money is the food, which works as anything can be currency. But what is a portion? Its literal definition is just part of something else, meaning their entire currency is based around the concept of an exponential curve infinitely approaching 1. Then you have to wrap your head around the concept that the money you get and trade with people comes in quarter chunks. Meaning you're paid with a portion of a portion, and that was not a play on words. Really, this boils down to very poor word choice, which this movie does a lot. The Resistance comes to mind. I can see how people ignore that, as it's just lazy filmmaking, and they're probably going for something like portion size, which again, in a community with 3-foot tall people and 7-foot tall people, what is a portion size, but whatever. The fact that a quarter portion and a half portion look oddly similar is a bit more of a problem. And that isn't 120 of them, so whatever a portion is, that isn't it. The next part is probably the saddest, as it's just a minute long trying to do the same thing that was the first 20 minutes of A New Hope. But instead of character development, we get an explanation of how dehydrated food works, a pointless callback to the first 3 movies, and a wall that's supposed to establish some stuff until you understand how wrong it is. Jumping ahead a bit, we learn that Rey was left into the care of Jabba the Wannabe by someone when she was very young. By the way, it's stupid that Jabba the Wannabe is the one taking care of her, because it's just there to establish that she lives alone, which would have been the same no matter whose care she was put in. But now we have to ask, how did she fall out of favor with the Wannabe? Was he a dick and betrayed her parents' trust, or did she instigate whatever to have him disown her? Back on topic, the movie shows her driving to a downed AT-AT, and this is where she lives, and this is where the wall of scratch marks is. So I'm not going to count it, but it looks to be around 2,000 marks, which is far too many to be weeks, and far too few to be days. But that's borderline nitpicky, even though the movie focused on this. The thing that is far less nitpicky is the fact that this isn't her original home, and that wall of scratch marks makes no sense. So after 8 years or so of living with Jabba the Wannabe, she then gets enough portions to afford a car thing, so then she can then find an AT-AT and then move into it. And after all that time, this is when you start counting. I know there's a possibility this was counting when she started living there, but that's not how it's framed in the film. Now, this is something that I almost like. So this is the most notable crack that shows the lazy soldering job done to fuse the two characters together. This level of aggression is so perfect for what the characters should have been. For all the pandering the movie does, it ignores one of the strongest reasons why the Star Wars movies worked.
I got him! Great kid! Don't get cocky!
While Luke is there in an archetype as Finn, Rey isn't a Han, which is completely retarded because her backstory demands it. But Josh, Han's in the movie, we don't need another one. 1, you are correct, but the realistic softening of his assholishness because of him getting older makes him more like a Ben-Han crossover. And 2, the movie is trying to have its cake and eat it too, with Rey being both Luke and Han, so her being Han shouldn't be that hard for you to see. And what's worse is once we leave Tatooine 2.0, she's never this agitated again. She's happy, excited, emotionally crippled, determined, greedy, delighted, calm, and collective, but the only time she's pissed off is when Finn holds her hand in a condescending way and when BB-8 asks for help. Now you could argue that her being a dick would be worse than what we got, but her being an asshole is within continuity. She walks around with a big stick, and we have to assume that she's a capable fighter because she fights a lot. Otherwise, a kid growing up in a very poor area who has spent most of her life salvaging just to be able to eat what little she does, has the capabilities of hiring a teacher to train her to fight. So she kicks the shit out of people all the time. We get that. But that exact same environment that she had to struggle with each and every day that forged her into a badass didn't affect her in any other way. She's not jaded because of the daily grind, and after 12 years the shock of reality hasn't hit her. She's still a good person deep down, but her being a dick is necessary because it was forced into her because of the culture she lived in, and she's irritable with people who are slow or talkative because the people she grew up with valued the opposite. But instead we get character growth and development that is all over the place. Damn, that was a long rant, and thank you God, because all of the Kylo scenes have problems that are short and sweet. So he's desperate to find the map, but why didn't he just find the Resistance headquarters? I know because movie, but you can't blame me for pointing out the corners when writers back themselves into them. And we're right back with Rey when she nearly tries to sell off BB-8. So a quick reminder, that's supposed to be 120 quarter-half portions. The real problem is that she was even willing to sell BB-8. That dick has no respect for anyone, and neither do I, apparently. Now, some might argue that she was tempted with bread money, but we have to ask, why would she even be tempted in the first place? Outside of other food and a random trinket here or there, what can she get? The only thing that's within that price range, which guessing 4 months of work at $1,000 a month, I can reasonably think of is a plane ticket off-world. Now maybe someone can think of something for her to get, but what this really boils down to is not having to work for food ever again. She has no reason to want money since all she does is wait for her family to pick her back up. Maybe it gets her fuel or something else, but we are already speculating so hard that we can't even begin to have a clue what use this could have, and what we know goes against established continuity. Now, this is almost a great idea as it foreshadows a point ahead in the film, but that point is really stupid, so that just ruins all the goodwill we get. So it turns out Finn is a janitor. So of course he has no idea about the docking regulations in the First Order. But once you know that fact, anything this movie did that was even a little okay is now meaningless. So the reason the First Order failed was because they took a janitor and then pulled him off his duties of cleaning, and then made him a stormtrooper on a Star Destroyer, but not just any stormtrooper, a member of a landing party meant to murder a bunch of innocent people. Now this is realistic because corporate management in so many different examples made worse mistakes than this, but for a movie, it's stupid.
You can't stop me 'cause I fight like a girl.
And then they tease us with what the movie could have been. The blockbuster that for months people would have still packed the theaters to see. Rilo throwing this hissy fit is one of the best moments in any of the Star Wars movies. Quite a lot of people talk about how Star Wars isn't art, and are commenting on the simplicity of the story for any reason, and I think it undersells the series hard. But they're not wrong either. It is a pretty simple story, sure, but there's enough complexity at work to give enough reason to look past any superficial value. This is an extremely strong character moment and humanizes a character that could have easily been a single-note villain. That is until the dialogue becomes so contrived it hurts. After the realistic screaming fit, he turns to a subordinate and then he's like, "A girl help them," and he's like, "A girl?" This just makes no sense, and if someone tries to bring up The Awakening, oh don't worry, that'll be coming up shortly, I will roll my eyes at you. This is really weird. Rather than just confusion because if someone walked up to you and said, "Oh yeah," and a dude helped them get away, your first reaction should ask them for a little bit more information, or anger at someone for wasting your time in playing the pronoun game. But no, Kylo Ren has to get upset and say Newman for our tiny brains to tell us that there's a rival between the main character and him. Oh, thank God Han showed up. Now, I'm not some fanboy that screams out when familiar faces show up. No, I'm not so simple that a little pandering is going to make my panties wet, but because of Han, we now have some decent writing. The only thing that even remotely resembles a Star Wars movie is Chewie and Han, and even though it was completely predictable, they didn't mess up the process of converting Han Solo's character into an old man, which up until this point I could have sworn Disney would have found a way to soil it. It doesn't take much for me to overlook a lot of flaws in a movie, and apparently it was Han for this movie because for the next bit it was just a haze of mediocrity. That is until he ruined the sentiment, but since it starts with Rey, I'm going to blame my focus on that rather than Han saying something stupid. So Rey says that this is a Millennium Falcon rather than saying that this is the Millennium Falcon.
This is a Millennium Falcon?
Yes, because iconic and legendary things comes in packs of 25. Which is then preceded by a very stupid line.
You're Han Solo.
I used to be.
Its stupidity is only offset by how easy it would be to fix it. Why would you say that you used to be you? No matter what that might be trying to imply, he is clearly the same old Han, just aged, so great continuity error. So why not call him a hero or a general? Either of those say the exact same thing that they were trying to say without sounding dumb because he is no longer those things. Skipping past some extremely awkward pacing, things I'd like to call a retarded Disney moment, and one of the most literal uses of protagonist armor I've seen in years, and some even more pandering to stupid Star Wars fans, because remember, we now almost have a Star Wars movie, we get to Snooki and Kylo being extremely retarded. So the fascist guy is super fascist, Then Snooki does the retarded villain thing where he gets really angry for no reason and then calms down immediately. And then we get to the Awakening. So ignoring the fact that the Awakening is just a single person's force power kind of starting to develop, because this movie is stupid enough without digging through every nook and cranny, when did this happen? The only time she could have possibly awakened was when she was flying the Millennium Falcon, and there was no indication that the Force was a factor in that at all. All I'm saying, if it was significant enough for someone across the galaxy to have felt it, at least have the person who caused it acknowledge that it happened. And then Snooki turns to the camera and says, Kylo Ren is Han's son. Either that, or you expect me to believe that it's perfectly natural to tell someone their dad is doing a thing, and then dramatically pause, and then tell that son that he is indeed his father's son.
He was training a new generation of Jedi. One boy, an apprentice, turned against him, destroyed it all.
Okay, I'm just gonna leave this here. No reason at all, I'm just gonna wait a few seconds and we can move on later. Yep, no reason. So ignoring the weak woman moment she just had, even though she is a hardened survivor that has lived through extreme suffering and poverty, wouldn't that have been the perfect thing to bounce off the idea of the Awakening, rather than nothing at all? Okay, so pointless speech aside, I think JJ is trying a little too hard to Nazi this up. I'm not sure if this is just a cheap way to get across that the bad guys are indeed bad, or if it's implying that Disney had some Nazis ties. But if that's the latter, then you have my interest. Because of this wonderful speech, we get to see another continuity error. So the last half of the movie is based around a ticking clock with the Death Star 2.0 going to destroy everything, and with this happening, they explain it a bit. So the Death Planet sucks the power from the sun and fires a massive blast. So for the second shot, it's heavily implied that the entire sun is gone because of the cannon, which means the cannon must have an efficiency ratio of 1 to 10 million, because a supernova can do a little more damage than destroying 5 planets. But outside of all of that mess, it's broad daylight when the Fourth Reich is being commenced. So did the massive planet-sized space station suck up an entire other star, and then float its way over to the new position, and then blow its load, and no one noticed a star and a planet just disappeared?
I need a weapon! You have one!
What? Really, what? This has to be the stupidest thing I have ever seen that was presented as something that was profound, or at the very least not stupid.
I need a weapon! You have one! I need a weapon! You have one! I need a weapon! You have one!
You do know, JJ and Disney, the only reason the lightsaber is any good is because the person who uses it has magical powers, right? The reason the blaster is nothing compared to the lightsaber is because the Force gives you reflexes or perspective that allows you to deflect blaster shots. Otherwise, it's just a sword that can cut things very well and anything can kill you. So you take a random janitor, give him a sword, and then throw him in the middle of a firefight and expect him not to die. Yes, because the Battle for Normandy would have went so much smoother if our men were armed with claymores rather than M16s. So many brave men died that day. And then after you watch the movie, you realize the only reason this happened was because there was only one lightsaber fight, and they forced in this awkward scene where two people who don't know how to sword fight swing weird weapons they have no reason to be proficient in. Guys, you're making a movie. If you want more fight scenes with a laser sword, then put them in your movie. Ignoring the fact that a general wouldn't show up to a battlefield on something that a stiff breeze would crush, we have a very petty moment from me. So guess who shows up as a means to pander? Yep, C-3PO. Him and R2-D2 are by far the absolute worst aspects of the nostalgia bait in this movie. Not only does he do nothing to benefit anything in this movie, and is just annoying, his presence actively screws up the continuity. Or are you going to tell me that a landing party really needs a droid that can speak multiple languages and can barely walk and move his arms? And then he just magically knows BB-8's name because he sure calls him by that name without being told that's what it was. And R2-D2 is somehow worse because we're meant to feel sad at its superfluous cameo. And his reveal made this so transparent. Little BB-8 starts screwing around and looking through stuff when this is the very first time we've seen this from him, and he just so happens to find R2-D2. Wow, that's not contrived at all.
Where are the others?
You mean the murderers, traitors, and thieves you call friends? You'll be relieved to hear I have no idea.
Okay, this was a little much. The stormtroopers having this mentality is okay. Having the First Order say this is okay. Having a fucking Sith apprentice say this is not okay. No matter how much I hate it, throughout the Star Wars franchise, joining the dark side meant siding with the Empire / whoever was the threat for the time period, and being outright evil. Traitor's incorrect because Finn was taken as a child and forced into the First Order so he can't betray what he hasn't agreed to. Murder is wrong because no one in the group has killed anyone that wasn't trying to kill them, unless BB-8 is murdering people off camera. And thief is an unjustified insult as Han was never a thief but a smuggler, and there is a difference. This could be just some simple and stupid mind games from Kylo, but once you hear it come from his mouth, it loses any effect it would have on anyone because of how hypocritical it is. You'd laugh.
The scavenger resisted you.
She is strong with the Force. Untrained but stronger than she knows.
They felt her awakening. They literally felt it through both time and space, and it came as a surprise to both of them that she was strong. Why would you spend time establishing something and then just ignore it? This movie had a massive budget, and no one proofread anything. Why is nothing more than the act of watching the movie causing me to find damaging flaws in the film? At least make me an active agent in evaluating its worth.
We have their location. We tracked their reconnaissance ship to the Elenium system.
So that's how you found the Resistance. By tracking. Wow, that seemed really easy. And then we get this moment. Now this is far less objective because a lot of it I find annoying and people could have it not bother them at all, but throughout this movie, two colors are very prominent. Red and blue are everywhere, and not in the set design or the costumes, but in the lighting. And every time it is shown, it is blue on one side and red on the other. And I know it's supposed to symbolize the conflict between the light and the dark side of the Force, but after having this idea drilled into me between the 8 movies, the 12 video games, and the millions of books, I don't want some hack director thinking he's an artist just because he wanted to create a visual motif of something we already know by now. It's bothersome to be talked down to, and this is being talked down to visually. But when Kylo kills Han, it's motifing so hard and this becomes an actual problem for me. So the red and the blue are all over the place, but when Kylo decides to murder the only worthwhile character in the movie, it fades to red, telling us that he is completely given into the dark side. And when the acting shows this, and the music shows this, and the framing shows this, I don't need JJ screwing around with the lights in order to inform me on the matter. And maybe I could forgive that if the red and blue light was actually coming from the set, but nearly all of it is non-diegetic. Then add in the fact that light on Han's face changes wildly between 2 steps, you have a scene with lazy production mixed in with condescending direction. Damn, that boy is fast for having to make up a lot of time and being shot. So here's where Rey's story finally crumbles. Her being able to pull the lightsaber, fine, Luke taught himself, so why not Rey? Having naturally strong defense is a common thing, so her being able to fight off Kylo makes sense. Her being able to use Jedi mind control is pushing it, but it's far from the worst thing in this movie. But the fact that in the middle of a battle she out-Jedis him is one of the most insulting things I've ever seen. Not only does she sit there forever not doing a thing while Kylo doesn't kill her, she uses forced concentration in order to overpower him and save the day. The only character to get any establishment other than, oh no, people died and I'm sad, and I want to be like Grandpappy, but since I can't, I'm going to throw a tantrum, and you're going to contradict it. She fucks people up with a stick. Let her fuck them up with the light stick. But no, rather than have any character development and have her using any of the skills she's learned throughout her entire life, we have to have her being perfect at everything. $302 million. And then she fights like she's never held a weapon before, further confirming the 2 characters smashed into one idea. Fuck Disney. And last but surely not least, we have this scene. Now, I have no clue what the scene is trying to imply, because we got stupid filmmaking BS that we need to figure out first. So she walks up to Luke and stands a good 20 feet away from him, and then awkwardly holds out his lightsaber in this weird, desperate manner that is just confusing. The look on her face is begging him to take it, but what do you expect him to do? Force pull it out of your hands? Stand a few feet away from him, and then offer him the weapon. Don't make him walk to you. And she just holds that position for hours, and nobody moves. What the fuck is happening? And this is what you end the movie on. The only thing sadder than this movie is the people I thought capable of viewing things not being able to see these flaws. Now again, you can like this movie despite its flaws, but don't you dare pretend they're not there. But no, Your Movie Sucks gives it a 6 out of 10. Red Letter Media misses just about everything I stated, and then we have I Hate Everything spending the first chunk of his review spewing platitudes about the movie not being perfect, but then again, Every movie has flaws.
Rose-tinted glasses people have for the original Star Wars is so ridiculously unbelievable at this point that no matter what anyone did in terms of like a sequel would be considered a disappointment to these people. Like, since when did bars for things have to be so goddamn high? Look, I don't want to sound like a prick or anything, but when I watch a movie, I probably look at it with a different eye than your general moviegoer. As in, I look at things like pacing, cinematography, writing, acting, the way the score is used, camera movements, all these little details that most people just don't care about.
Fuck you. Don't attempt to undermine my points just because you're a shitty reviewer who doesn't even know what so bad is good means, you incompetent bitch. So, summary. The movie has massive pacing problems that needed to be worked out, a main character that needed consistent character development, Han should have died in the next movie or have been introduced in the next one and killed there, someone other than the brain-dead J.J. Abrams to direct it because fuck him and that lighting, and most importantly of all, someone other than Disney to own the intellectual property.